Hello and welcome to our third week on the theme of diversity for awakened. You know, nothing breaks my heart more than seeing people misuse the Bible to oppress and harm others. This has, of course, happened throughout Christian history, and a case in point is when American Christian preachers used the Bible to justify the horrific institution of slavery. This was, of course, an incredible misuse of theology, but they were able to do it because the Bible seems to take the institution of slavery for granted as a part of life. Of course, it ignores the socio-historical context that Jesus and his people were a minority people and were oppressed by the Roman Empire. It ignores Jesus' call for all the captives to be set free, but American Christian preachers used the Bible in a way that harmed others and justified a horrific institution. Of course, even though slavery has officially ended, and even though segregation has officially ended, Michelle Alexander in her book, The New Jim Crow, points out that the prison system in the United States has set up a sort of slavery, a sort of segregation in our current day. Because the way that this often happens, if you look at statistics, is that people of color, especially young black men, are targeted by the criminal justice system and often wind up in prison. And then even if they get out, they have a label slapped on them and often end up back in prison. It segregates people in the way that racists want to happen. I'm remembering a day when I had a holy conversation with someone who had just gotten out of prison. This week, our spiritual practice is to have a holy conversation with someone with a different life experience, and perhaps especially someone who may have been incarcerated at some point. And my experience goes like this. I was walking down the street one day by a Subway restaurant, and someone was hungry. There was a woman who was standing outside of the restaurant and needed something to eat. And so I offered to get her a sandwich, and I went in and I got us both a sandwich. And she wasn't comfortable going inside the restaurant, so I brought it out, and there was a stoop right outside the restaurant. And we sat down together, and we shared our sandwiches and began to talk. And she talked about how she had just gotten out of prison, like literally, she had just gotten out of prison and they had dropped her off on this street near the Subway. And she had no idea what she was going to do. She had no home, she had no money, she had no family, she had nothing. She was just there on the street. And she shared with me her experience, and there wasn't anything that I could really do to alleviate the pain or the anxiety or to help her situation, and it wasn't my role to problem solve. But I did listen, we did share a meal together, and we prayed together. And that memory stands out in my mind, not because I did anything particularly noble, because I didn't. All I did was sit down and share a meal. But it stands out in my memory because it was a moment when I recognized how unjust the criminal justice system was, how unfair life is for some folks, and how it is our obligation as people of faith to try to make this world a little bit better for people who are suffering. I look back on that conversation and realize that it was a holy conversation, and I look back on that meal and recognize that it was communion. This week, I encourage you to have a holy conversation with someone who has a different life experience than you have had. Go and find someone through whom a conversation with them will help you grow. May it be so, and thanks be to God. Amen.